You're listening to the Wonderfully Bookish podcast, where we talk about all things bookish and wonderful. You can find the notes for this episode and all of the others at wonderfullybookish.co.uk/podcast. Hi, how are we all? So, it's been a while. So where I say in the title of this episode that it's an accidental hiatus, I looked at my old episodes a few days ago because I thought the other day, I'm going to get straight back into this podcast again. I don't think it's been that long since I last posted. Looked at the episodes and the last time was, November or something? That was entirely by accident. I'm determined not to let this podcast that I've worked so hard on disappear into the abyss. So here I am, bringing it back. Hooray! I like to think of this like a season 2, and season 1 was just a very short pilot season. Yeah, let's go with that. That sounds good and convincing, right? Not like I just abandoned it because I'm so easily distracted and a massive procrastinator. Nope. Okay, cool. So this is just going to be a really quick episode to keep you up to date on what's happening, so you don't feel completely abandoned. So yeah, let's get straight into it.
It's wonderfully bookish, whoa. All things books, let's start the show. Everything from classics to contemporary. Come and chat about books with me. If you're a reader of YA, grab a cuppa and just press play.
So this year has started off pretty crazy, and this summer is looking like it's going to be mad too. I think by the end of the summer, I'm going to be so relieved that I almost have nothing planned until Christmas, because I don't think I'm going to be able to breathe this summer. So I'm going on holiday. I've got all sorts of things going on. But I think the biggest thing that has happened this year is that I joined a theatre group. So I've been into theatre for years, since I was a kid. But then when I went to uni in 2013, God, that was so long ago, I just kind of fell out of it. I just didn't get back into it again. And so joining a theatre group is something that I wanted to do for a long time. So early this year, I bit the bullet and joined one of my local musical theatre groups. And I've been there for a couple of months now, and I'm completely loving it. I'm so glad I did it. I'm just so excited to be part of a group. And to be honest, it's just great to have a hobby that actually gets me out of the house. That's the problem with working from home, is that sometimes I could go a week or even 2 weeks, and then I'd think, oh my God, I haven't even left the house. Like, I'm never the kind of person who will just stay in my pajamas. Like, I have to get up and get dressed and be human and sit at my desk. I can't just work in bed. But when it gets to a point when you realize that you haven't even stepped outside in 2 weeks, you start to think you could do with a hobby. So that was what I did, and I thought, I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to join a theatre group because it's the one thing that I've wanted to do for so long. And so that's what I did, and it was one of the best decisions I made, I think, because I'm loving it. So apart from that, I'm just so happy to be back doing this podcast again. There's going to be a few minor changes just to make it a bit more fun and varied and easier for me to produce, because I do this completely alone, and it can be so time consuming. So I was so kind of focused on trying to find people to interview, and that was taking so much time to do. So I'm going to make this a little bit easier on myself, but also hopefully a bit more entertaining for you too. So I'm going to start doing a few solo episodes, because I've got a few topics that I'd love to talk about that don't necessarily need somebody else there for me to talk about them with, if that makes sense. So I'm going to start uh, doing some solo episodes, and one of the series that I might start doing is something around kind of forgotten authors throughout history, or authors that might be well known by some people, but they have these kind of crazy backstories, crazy histories that um, we might not know about. Because I find stories like that so fascinating. And recently, I've been listening to the Wonder Women podcast, and I love how they talk about these women throughout history that just have such cool stories. Um, and it kind of inspired me to start looking at it from an author perspective. So, trying to find some really cool authors who have these mad stories that I can talk about, and then kind of reflect on as how that comes into play today. Because some of these authors were around like hundreds of years ago. It'll be interesting to reflect on whether the same things would happen today. So yeah, that'll be coming. I won't ramble on too much about it because I don't want to spoil it completely. But and episodes I think are going to be a little less often. I think with what I'm now calling as the pilot series, um, I was trying to post an episode once a week and it just wasn't working because it, as I said, it's so time consuming. And when I work full time as well, and now I've also got theatre rehearsals twice a week, it's just not possible to put an episode out once a week without like having other people to do some of the work for me, which I don't have. Um, so episodes might just be either whenever I get to record them, or if I get into the swing of things, maybe every couple of weeks. And who knows, maybe I'll get into a good rhythm and I'll start putting them out weekly again, but I don't want to kind of push myself too far and then not post anything for 4 months like has just happened. So yeah, so I have a tendency to just get myself into such a slump with I've done it with blogging a lot, I've done it with reading. Like I think the whole of 2018 I read something like 12 books, which for me, I think in 2017 I read about 60 books. And to go down to reading like 12 throughout the whole year was a bit rubbish. And I think this year, we're almost 4 months through the year, and I think I've only read a handful this year as well. So yeah, I don't know if anyone's with me here, but I just tend to get into such a slump with things, and it's so hard to pull myself back out of it. But then as soon as I do, I kind of go full speed ahead and I'm really excited to get back into it. Um so I think with this podcast I need to kind of pace myself, not go crazy and start posting, every day, and then within a month realize that I'm kind of in a slump again. So yeah, I'm just going to calm down and take it slow, and I think that'll be a lot better. So, have you read any cool books recently? I thought I'd give you a quick update. Considering this is supposed to be about books, I'll give you a quick update on some of the books that I've been reading. I've been so lucky this year to get so many really cool proof copies of books from publishers. And one of the ones I was most excited about was On the Come Up by Angie Thomas, um, published by Walker, which is, I think, one of my favourite publishers just because they have so many of my favourite authors. And in case you're not aware, Angie Thomas wrote The Hate You Give, which I think has been close to the top of the New York Times bestseller list for something ridiculous, like over 100 weeks or something like that. And On the Come Up went straight up to join it. And they're both still there. I think they're both still there at the top of the bestseller list. I finished On the Come Up quite recently and I loved it. I think I preferred it to The Hate You Give. And that's so good. I loved it. And then another book that I read recently was The Quiet at the End of the World by Lauren James, which, oh my God, if you haven't read a Lauren James book, please get one now. Whether you order it or go and get it from a library, just read one of her books because they're incredible. I've always said that Lauren James is the queen of plot twists because she's just so good at kind of weaving together these really intricate plots, and then you think you know what's going to happen, and then it all just kind of flips on its head and goes crazy. And I never expect them. It's always such a shock because I never expect any of her big twists. And The Quiet at the End of the World was the same as that. I was just kind of baffled by the fact that Lauren James can just come up with so many of these amazing stories that just shock me every time. So definitely recommend that. And then another one that I've just read, which now, at the time when I read it, I really liked it. I was on the blog tour for it quite recently, and I put together this kind of mood board using kind of stock images and things. And at the time, I really liked it. And recently, in the past, literally only in the past few days, Twitter has kind of been going crazy about this book for being really controversial. So the book is The Hand, the Eye, and the Heart by Zoe Marriott. And yeah, I really enjoyed it when I read it. But apparently it's now being seen as a bit controversial because apparently all of Zoe Marriott's books are kind of rooted in Asian and Chinese culture. Like The Hand, the Eye, and the Heart is kind of like a Mulan retelling, but Zoe Marriott is a white author, and I don't think a lot of people are happy with the fact that, especially in UK young adult, um, a lot of like Asian authors aren't getting their books published and their stories about themselves, like their own voices stories about themselves, or not themselves, but their own cultures, and they know they've grown up around their own cultures, obviously. But then white authors are kind of coming in and writing their stories and getting them published. And yeah, I can completely see where kind of some of the controversy is coming from. So that's going to be a fun book review to write. So yeah, I'm looking forward to trying to write that. And now recently, the book that I'm currently reading is Summer Bird Blue by Akemi Dawn Bowman, who I'm just so in love with. She's just amazing. And I actually interviewed her for my first ever episode of this podcast. So, yeah, if you go to my podcast page, then you will see my interview with her. And that was mostly about her first book, Starfish. And we kind of talked about Summer Bird Blue as an upcoming release. And now it's been out. I think it came out earlier this month. And I just adore it. I just love her writing so much. So, if you've read anything good recently and you want to give me some recommendations, then you can head to my podcast page at wonderfullybookish.co.uk/podcast. And if you click on the show notes for a particular episode, you can leave comments there on the page. And I'm always really happy to hear about what you think about each episode. And I thought it would be fun to get a bit of interaction going. So, my question for this episode, if you want to leave a comment, is just what are you reading at the moment? What have you read anything good recently? Tell me in the comments, and yeah, we can have a little chat. So, as a side note, I'm always looking for new podcast guests. If you want to come on and have a chat about something to do with books, anything to do with books, then please do. If you're an author or a blogger or you're just a reader, please come on and let's have a chat in an episode. You can send me an email at podcast@wonderfullybookish.co.uk. I'll make sure that email address is in the show notes for this episode, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So, finally, if you're listening to this using Apple Podcasts, I would love it if you could head to iTunes and leave a quick review. I'll put a link in the notes again for that. All reviews help me and the podcast out a lot. It just kind of helps it helps its visibility in, the charts and things. It's not going to be in the charts because I haven't posted for 4 months. But yeah, it's great for me to read feedback. I just love reading any honest feedback about it. So yeah, I'd be really grateful for that. So I'm going to go. This is kind of I don't want to turn this into a massive ramble that gets really boring. So thanks so much for listening, and I'll be back soon with some new episodes. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. You can find all of the information from this episode, including all of the things that we talked about and a little bit about today's guest, in the show notes, and they'll be at wonderfullybookish.co.uk/podcast. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and the links for those will also be in the show notes. And finally, if you want to chat or you've just got a burning question you want to ask about this episode or any of the others, you can pop me an email at podcast@wonderfullybookish.co.uk. See you next time.